First, second, since I basically created this party, it is only natural to support it. By the way, I want to thank all parliamentary parties, all parties represented in parliament, for their patriotic state stance, for their support of the Russian people, the fatherland, and me as head of state in resolving the crucial challenges facing our country.
Перед которыми стоит страна, наше государство.
As for today's topic, analysis without understanding funding sources to achieve those goals, thorough professional assessments of collateral consequences, and so on.
Это очень важный документ, важный, серьезный. Это ориентиры партии на ближайшие годы в развитии страны. В решении задач развития страны. Но знаете, хочу сказать по-честному, уж рядовой человек точно вряд ли все прочитал в этой программе до конца. Но даже люди, которые профессионально занимаются политикой, и то, наверное, до каждого слова там не добрались. Хотя, повторяю, это очень важный, концептуальный, фундаментальный документ. Но для меня важно и другое. Важно то, что «Единая Россия» никогда не занималась популизмом. Вот это важно всегда, но сегодня особенно важно. Понятно, что в ходе избирательных кампаний любая политическая сила, стараясь привлечь внимание и симпатии избирателей, она заявляет какие-то цели, которые очень привлекательными являются для граждан, говорит о том, что эти цели будут, безусловно, достигнуты, но часто очень, или, скажем так, аккуратно, иногда все-таки это делается без такого профессионального анализа, без понимания источников финансирования, достижения этих целей, профессиональной оценки, глубокой профессиональной оценки сопутствующих последствий и так далее, и так далее.
It goes without saying that Russia's dramatic and substantial escalation in both the sheer destructive power and overall frequency of targeted military strikes directed against Kyiv, numerous other key Ukrainian urban centers, and vital maritime port infrastructures has triggered an enormous reaction and wide-ranging resonance across Ukraine itself, throughout Western nations, and right here within our own domestic sphere. Taking into account the extensive information, strategic data, and intelligence assessments currently at your disposal, what specific strategic and tactical objectives do these intensive strike campaigns actually achieve in practice? How truly effective and decisive are they proving to be on the ground? And in what ways, if at all, do they fundamentally influence, shape, or alter the broader military balance and operational developments unfolding along the front lines as a whole?
Они эффективны, эти удары, они своевременными являются. И, безусловно, это помогает нашим бойцам, нашим ребятам, героям нашим на фронте решать стоящие перед ними боевые задачи. Почему? Да потому что это нарушает возможности доставки техники, боеприпасов, ротации кадров на линии боевого соприкосновения. Это
First and foremost, these strikes systematically disrupt and dismantle the defense industry's capacity to modernize and upgrade its weaponry, an entire process that is carried out not simply with routine support, but through the direct and active involvement of Western sponsors. And certainly, without a single shadow of a doubt, this brings about an exceptionally profound, immediate, and overwhelmingly positive impact upon the actual military results that are being achieved directly on the battlefield, particularly with regard to severely disrupting and degrading critical civilian infrastructure systems, as well as vital logistical supply lines, strategic transportation networks, and key transit corridors.
Еще одно стратегическое поражение России. На этот раз, как известно, за 40 дней и с помощью массированных ракетных ударов и БПЛА по нашим гражданским объектам и по логистике.
The publicly stated goal was destroying entire sectors of our economy, undermining national unity of the people and the cohesion of Russian society. In short, the goal is to bring Russia to its knees, something they've long dreamed of and constantly talk about. As you know, this 40-day deadline expired on August 5th. The question arises, what is the result? It is beyond any shadow of a doubt and completely undeniable that carrying out such targeted strikes against civilian infrastructure and facilities that are essentially defenseless, and most critically, tragically, and devastatingly against peaceful civilians themselves, inevitably inflicts very real and tangible economic damage upon our nation, while also regrettably leading to injuries and casualties, and every single loss of human life, as I wish to emphasize with the utmost gravity and absolute seriousness, consistently and invariably represents an immense, profound, and heartbreaking tragedy for each and every affected family across the country.
Но все-таки конечный результат для противника оказался прямо противоположным ожиданиям.
Naturally, no turning point in the standoff with Russia could or did occur. The Kyiv regime and its masters cannot, have not, and will never gain any advantage.
Не получили и никогда не получат.
Furthermore, in direct and measured response to this unmistakable escalation, one that was fundamentally driven by deeply biased assessments regarding the actual realities of the battlefield, the true state of the Ukrainian economy, and a governance system thoroughly riddled with corruption, all further fueled by reckless public relations campaigns and unchecked political ambition, we significantly expanded and intensified our precision strikes against Ukraine's entire military-industrial defense manufacturing complex, including key strategic facilities located directly within the city of Kyiv itself, while also actively initiating targeted retaliatory measures in response to the hostile actions and attacks that the enemy has continued to carry out against our own civilian industrial base and critical transportation logistics networks. The Kyiv regime aimed to damage our economy. What did it do? It opened this Pandora's box itself. As a result, you must now prepare to face retaliatory measures directed straight against your most vulnerable economic sectors, which, frankly speaking, are already finding it hard to survive under heavy tax burdens. This also applies to agriculture, whose exports provide the Kyiv regime with its main revenues. Next, you want to disrupt our logistics? One might ask our adversaries. Well then, our response will not take long to arrive. Here it comes. Meanwhile, the Russian army's actions are, of course, far more painful and far more destructive. I have repeatedly said there will always be a response. Most importantly, the enemy's actions have had zero effect on the situation on the front line. Moreover, our forces are not only advancing in all sectors, but have picked up their pace. The Russian armed forces are steadily fulfilling their mission to fully achieve the goals of the special operation. Of course, we must and will continue to improve our air defense system and build up its capabilities. We need to improve coordination between security and civilian agencies at all levels and engage state enterprises and private business. This is especially vital ahead of elections to the State Duma and other levels of government. The enemy is trying to intimidate us and disrupt the elections. We will certainly not allow them to achieve this. I am firmly convinced that this entire campaign of psychological warfare waged against Russian society is completely doomed to fail. International mediators whose views and opinions we undoubtedly hold in high regard are making efforts to find a resolution to this current situation, a situation that, I wish to emphasize particularly, was provoked entirely by themselves. Meanwhile, the regime in Kyiv is desperately attempting to avert an outright catastrophic collapse, and clear trends indicating precisely that seem to be gradually emerging on the ground.
Мнение которых мы, безусловно, уважаем, пытаются выйти из сложившейся для них ситуации, которую сами же, хочу подчеркнуть, сами же и спровоцировали. Киевский режим пытается не допустить этой ситуации катастрофического развития. А тенденции такие, судя по всему, просматриваются.
At the same time, the proposals brought to us are sometimes, I would say, exotic and unacceptable. We are always open to dialogue, but only based on realities on the ground. I must ask, what are these exotic proposals? You know, I really would prefer not to go into full detail on the matter right at this moment, as all of this simply represents an exploratory effort to test out possible terms and conditions. These various ideas have certainly surfaced in discussions before, but they are now being framed and presented in a completely different light. Even so, it would be far too premature to jump ahead right now and attempt to definitively declare what specific elements could eventually serve as the true foundation for an agreement. Well, due to Russian strikes on ports, we hear frequent hysterical statements from Western officials, including at the UN, claiming the world might face famine because grain supplies were cut, naturally blaming us. As I have pointed out on previous occasions, the authorities in Kyiv brought this situation upon themselves and effectively unleashed these consequences by launching strikes against our own civilian infrastructure and openly proclaiming their explicit intention to inflict maximum damage on the Russian economy. Well, precisely as I have just pointed out, they have received their direct response. When it comes to their economy, it is entirely true that exporting these particular agricultural goods represents one of the primary sources of Ukraine's export revenues. But regarding broader global issues, practically nothing will change on the world stage, because first and foremost, we possess significant export potential ourselves. In fact, just yesterday, our agriculture minister officially reported a volume of at least 60 million tons, which constitutes a remarkably solid reserve. Yes, we also face export challenges, but we...
Но мы эти вопросы решим. А значит, никакого дефицита на мировом рынке не будет.